Hi, I'm Miriam, and this is my story. Please like and subscribe. I was born and brought up in London till I was 10. My dad's a doctor and mom's an artist. Both my parents loved me to bits, so much so that they decided to move to the countryside to ensure I grew up in a pollution-free, stress-free environment. And I wasn't complaining because I loved being close to nature. Also, I loved painting. Being around nature was a great inspiration. On my first day at my new home, I met a girl in the yard who looked my age. Her clothes were dirty and her hands were full of strawberries. She smiled when she saw me, stuffed the strawberries into her mouth, and held out her sticky hand. Hi, I'm Stacy. Are you new here? Yeah, we only just moved today. Do you see these horses? They're all mine. This one's Stella, he's James, this tiny one's Marco, and that brown one over there, he's Philip. Wow, aren't you scared of them? What? No, they're my friends. I'll show you. Actually, those horses were all ours, and Stacy was lying through her teeth. But I decided to play along. Stacy took out an apple from her pocket and went straight to the tiny horse. Oh, sorry. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. See, he loves eating from my hands. You know what? I can even talk to animals, and I understand what they're saying. Like the other day, Philip said he wanted to marry Stella. So I told Dad. Just then, our new housekeeper appeared.
Stacy, what are you doing here? Didn't I ask you to feed the hens?
He then turned to me.
Morning, Missy. Sir's looking for you.
Dad, you know her?
Of course. She's Miriam, Sir's daughter.
Stacy's face went a bit red because her lies had been caught, and she rushed off while I couldn't help laughing. I found her super interesting, and we soon became really good friends. We even went to the same school. I'd always been a bright student while Stacy sucked at studies, and she wore clothes that were very ungirly. Baggy pants and loose t-shirts, that's what made her the butt of jokes in school. A girl named Jennifer was particularly mean to her. One day, she stopped Stacy in the school corridor. You're the daughter of Miriam's housekeeper, right? So technically, you're her servant. I was not going to let anyone bully my BFF, not under my watch. We're closer than sisters, and she's my best friend. But what would you know? You don't have any. I guess it would be better to have no friends than to have one that looks like her. This made me so angry that I slapped Jennifer, and we broke into a huge fight. Stacy also jumped in, and by the time we got separated by teachers, Jennifer's hair looked like she'd gotten an electric shock. The three of us ended up in detention together, where Stacy went on her lying spree once again. You know, Miriam, when I was 5, I got lost in the woods for 4 days. I met an old woman there who taught me how to cast spells. I almost burst out laughing seeing the horrified look on Jennifer's face. When my dad found me, I was floating in the air. He almost died of a heart attack. Then when I came home, I cast a laughing spell on him, and he couldn't stop laughing for days. People thought he'd gone mad. Do you remember that spell? No, but I remember one that will make a person dance nonstop for days. Jennifer sat as still as a mouse after that, and we rushed out the second detention was over. We both laughed so hard, and we knew we'd made an enemy in school. That evening, I asked Mom if we could buy Stacy some new clothes. She immediately agreed, and we all went shopping. We got Stacy some nice dresses that made her look so nice and different. On our way back, Stacy couldn't stop thanking Mom. She told me although she had a few of her mom's dresses, she didn't wear them because she didn't want to get them dirty. Do you miss her a lot? Sometimes. I keep myself busy so that I don't miss her too much. I've taught myself lots of things because I've always been a genius. Like when I was 2, I could recite poems and write letters. I studied so hard that I became a master of algebra and psychogolly. You mean psychology? Yeah, that too. I laughed and hugged her tight. She was such a bluffer. I guess bluffing was her way of coping with the loneliness she struggled with since she was a baby. With her dad being busy with work all day, she literally had no one for company, except of course horses, cows, and hens. I was her first human friend ever. When I was in 10th grade, Stacy and I were discussing our science project in school when I accidentally bumped into someone in the hallway. As I looked up, I saw the most beautiful blue pair of eyes staring at me and annoying Jen. Hey, don't you have eyes? Or has your silly friend cast a spell on you that made you blind?
It's okay, Jen. She didn't kill me. Hey, I'm Chris.
He's my brother, and he's strictly off limits for weirdos like you.
Stop embarrassing me, Jen. I can take care of myself.
Chris, you know nothing about these two. If he's your brother and still likes you, he clearly doesn't know anything about you either. Shut up, you witch. Jennifer was holding a cup of coffee that she threw on my dress.
Jen, what's wrong with you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It was an accident. Just then, Stacy stomped on Jennifer's foot so hard that she screamed out loud. I'm sorry, it was an accident. We both high-fived and went away. But before that, I caught Chris looking at me and smiling. For some reason, his smile melted my heart. The next few days, Jennifer followed Chris like a shadow. I got to know that Chris had been studying abroad and had just come back. He was 1 year senior to us. And once, when I was sitting alone in the library, Chris came and sat beside me.
Hey, I've heard a lot about your mom, and I would love to see her creation someday, if that's okay with you.
Gosh, I just couldn't stop looking into those big blue eyes. Snap out of it, idiot. Of course. You can come home and I'll show you her paintings. But won't Jennifer be mad?
Don't worry about her. I don't know why she's acting so strange lately. She sometimes forgets that I'm the elder sibling, not her.
When I told Stacy that Chris was coming home, she wasn't too thrilled because he was Jennifer's brother. She already knew I had a huge crush on him. That evening, I told Mom that my friend would come over to see her work, and she readily agreed. When Chris finally came, Mom greeted him warmly. But all of a sudden, Chris started shouting,
Ma'am, I'm a big fan of your art. I've seen some of your paintings at a London art gallery.
That's so nice. Miriam, why don't you go take him upstairs to show him the paintings?
Thank you, ma'am. It was a pleasure meeting you.
I was so confused at his weird behavior. But then I saw Stacy laughing crazily just outside the door, and I knew she had something to do with it. Did you meet Stacy on your way here?
Yeah. In fact, she was the one who told me that your mom has a hearing problem.
Good Lord, I swore I'd kill Stacy for this. Chris and I started going out after that day. He was funny and a nature lover like me. Jennifer didn't like our budding relationship one bit, but she couldn't really do anything about it. Once, Chris came to pick me up for a movie night. When I entered the car and tried putting on the seatbelt, it got stuck. He leaned in to see what the matter was, and suddenly, we were so close that I almost forgot to breathe. Just then, Chris looked into my eyes, and we kissed. It was my first kiss ever, and it was freaking amazing. I knew I was totally in love. Then Chris told me his biggest secret.
Miriam, I want you to know something. I was 8 when I had a terrible accident. Doctors had to cut off half of my left leg to save me.
Chris pulled up his left trouser, and I was shocked to see that he had a prosthetic leg.
I'll understand if you don't want to date me after this, but I couldn't keep this a secret from you any longer.
Hey, don't be silly. This doesn't change a thing. And then I kissed him again. The next day when I came to school, I saw Stacy waving wildly. I ran to see what the matter was. You heard about Chris? He has a fake leg. What? I mean, who told you? Everyone at school is talking about it. I was horrified that a secret was out now, but who could have done that? I frantically searched for Chris everywhere, but he'd just vanished. I even asked Jennifer, but she pushed me aside angrily. My brother trusted you, and this is what you did to him? You'll never get to see him again. I felt devastated. I even went to his home hoping to meet him, but one of his servants told me that he'd moved to London for good. I missed Chris so much that I cried for days. Stacy tried to cheer me up with her silly stories. She'd forced me to go on hikes with her, and she encouraged me to paint more often. With her help, I started to get better. Soon after, we had an art competition where the winner would get a chance to study in a prestigious art school in Milan. Stacy, if I win this competition, I'll literally get to go to the university of my dreams. Don't get your hopes too high. I'm participating too. She then revealed that she was planning to paint a pig rolling in mud. Turned out that Jennifer was also participating in the competition, and I had to admit, she painted quite well, but I was confident of my art skills. So I just focused on my painting, and it turned out to be more amazing than I'd expected. Our art teacher asked us to wait outside for an hour until the judges came and reviewed the paintings. I went to the cafeteria to grab some lunch and Stacy joined me there. And just then, I heard an announcement.
Miriam, I want you to come quickly to the auditorium, please.
It was our art teacher. I jumped with joy, thinking I'd won the competition. But when I got there, I got the biggest shock of my life. Someone had ruined my painting by throwing ink all over it. I burst into tears as soon as I saw it. Stacy also looked really upset, but she tried to console me. It's okay, Miriam. There's always next time. You can participate in the competition next year. Who do you think could have done that? I worked so hard for this day.
Miriam, I'm so sorry for what happened, but don't worry. We're looking into the CCTV footage and we'll know very soon who did it.
And sure enough, we found out the culprit, and it was Stacy. I couldn't believe it, but the proof was right there in front of my eyes. Stacy deliberately spilling ink on my painting. Stacy, why? Why would you do that? You knew how important this competition was to me. How could you? Why? I did that so I could win. My paintings are so much better than yours, but you just think that you're the greatest artist and I'm nobody because I'm your servant's daughter, huh? Wow, so you've just started assuming things now? You know what? Just forget it. I'm so done with you. I stopped talking to Stacy after that. Our parents figured out that our friendship had turned sour, but we didn't tell them exactly what happened. I just told my mom that my painting wasn't selected and I'd try again next year. The next few days were the worst days of my life. I missed Chris, and in spite of what Stacy had done, I missed her too, especially when I watched MSA videos alone. It was usually our favorite thing to do together. One day, as I was out in the stable feeding the horses, I heard a familiar voice behind me.
Miriam?
Chris, what are you doing here?
I hope you're not still mad at me for vanishing like that.
What? No, but you do owe me an explanation. And then, Chris told me that the day he'd come to pick me up, he was talking to Jennifer on the phone. She was really mad at him for dating me.
When your seatbelt got stuck, I put the phone aside without realizing the call was still on. She heard me telling you about the prosthetic leg, and I guess she thought that if she let the rumor about my leg spread, I'd just blame you for it, which is exactly what happened. I'm sorry.
My goodness, how can anyone be so evil? But how did you figure out that Jennifer was behind all of this?
I didn't. Stacy did.
Stacy?
Yeah, she sent me a recording of Jen's confession. I think you need to go talk to her. I'll wait here.
A recording? What had Stacy been up to? I hugged Chris quickly and went looking for Stacy. I found her sitting under a tree. Stacy, I need to talk to you. Yeah? About what? How do you know that it was Jennifer who spread the news about Chris's fake leg? Well, she admitted it herself. What? How? And why? That day after I ruined your painting, she came up to me and told me what an excellent job I'd done by showing you your place. I just knew she had something to do with you and Chris breaking up, so I decided to pretend to be friends with her for a while. And sure enough, one day she started boasting about how she'd managed to break your relationship with Chris. She told me everything. Stacy, I don't understand you. On one hand, you ruined my chances of getting into my dream university, and on the other hand, you reunite me with Chris. Why? I ruined your painting so that you wouldn't move to Milan. You were the only friend I had, Miriam, and I didn't want to lose you. I already lost my mom. I didn't want to lose more people I love. Stacy was the strongest girl I knew, and it hurt me deeply to see tears in her eyes. You weirdo. You could have just said that and I wouldn't have even participated in the competition. In fact, I decided right then that even if I won, I wouldn't move to Milan. City life is just not for me. I'm happy here with my horses, cows, and my wacko best friend. I hugged Stacy as we both cried, and Chris smilingly looked on.
The wooden stairs creaked as Miranda and I walked down to the basement.
I can't wait for you to see what Grandma and I do for fun.
Miranda looked at me, her eyes twinkling. Are you going to give me a hint? I smiled at her. She took my hand and squeezed it gently.
Well, we capture exquisite rare things.
When we reached the bottom of the basement, Miranda stopped. She stroked the side of my face and turned my face so our eyes met.
You have the most gorgeous eyes I've ever seen.
It was as though something clicked in my mind and I looked around the basement. A sense of dread slowly rose up in me. Before I could respond, something hit me over the head and I fell to the ground with a thud. Hey, my name is Dimitri. Like and subscribe to our amazing channel. Tap that notification bell so that you will know when we post new stories. As soon as I saw Miranda, I knew that I wanted her. There were numerous rumors at the high school that she and her grandmother were into some weird stuff. But I mean, who doesn't have something weird about their family? It took me about a month before I was able to muster up all my courage to not only approach her, but to ask her out. I sweated nervously as she looked at me before she smiled and said yes. After dating a few months, I invited Miranda over to meet my parents. As we pulled up to my driveway, Miranda looked at me nervously.
Do I look okay? Do you think they'll like me?
I took her hand and kissed it softly. My parents are going to love you. How could they not? Dinner was a hit. My parents loved Miranda and made her feel at home. After dessert, Miranda said that it was time for her to head home. Mom and Dad hugged her. Mom held her hand and said,
I can't wait to meet your grandmother. Maybe we could have both of you over next time.
Miranda smiled and nodded, and we left. As I dropped her off at her grandma's, she turned to me.
How about you come over next Saturday to meet Grandma? She's been longing to meet you.
She smiled. I'd love to. Do you need me to bring anything?
Just bring those pretty eyes of yours.
Miranda leaned in and kissed me before she hopped out of the car. I waited until she was safe inside the house before driving off. As I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder if Miranda's grandmother would welcome me with open arms as my parents welcomed her granddaughter. The next few days were nerve-wracking. Meeting Miranda's grandmother was a huge deal for me, and I hoped it would turn out as successful as I wanted it to be. I mean, you only get to make a first impression once, and I wanted the first time that we met to be memorable for both of them. On the day, I pulled up to Miranda's grandmother's house at 6 p.m. sharp. I walked with a bouquet of flowers for Miranda and one for her grandmother. I nervously adjusted my clothing before I rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, Miranda opened it and she greeted me with a warm smile and stepped aside for me to enter.
Hey, handsome. Hope you brought your appetite.
I smiled and handed Miranda her bouquet of flowers.
Thank you, babe. I'll go and put these in some water.
As she walked away, she yelled,
Grandma, our special guest has arrived.
A wrinkled older woman with short gray hair and clothing 2 sizes too big hobbled the living room. Her voice cracked as she spoke.
Good night, Dimitri. Miranda has told me quite a lot about you.
Good night, ma'am. I hope that she said only good things. Miranda's grandmother smiled and nodded. I got you these, I said as I handed over the flowers. Miranda told me how much you loved lilies. Her grandmother took the flowers and smelled them.
Will you take an old lady's hand?
She extended her hand and placed it on the crook of my elbow.
Let's eat.
She smiled as we strolled towards the kitchen. After dinner, Miranda eagerly wanted to show me something in the basement. As a loving boyfriend, also hoping to spend some time alone away from her grandmother, I accepted the venture to head to the basement. The wooden stairs creaked as Miranda and I walked down to the basement.
I can't wait for you to see what Grandma and I do for fun.
Miranda looked at me, her eyes twinkling. Are you going to give me a hint? I smiled at her. She took my hand and squeezed it gently.
Well, we capture exquisite rare things.
When we reached the bottom of the basement, Miranda stopped. She stroked the side of my face and turned my face so our eyes met.
You have the most gorgeous eyes I've ever seen.
It was as though something clicked in my mind, and I looked around the basement. A sense of dread slowly rose up in me. Before I could respond, something hit me over the head and I fell to the ground with a thud. I opened my eyes groggily and shook my head as I tried to focus on my surroundings. I was tightly tied to a chair.
Oh, you're up finally,
Miranda said as she twirled in a chair in front of me.
It wouldn't have been as much fun if you were still unconscious.
I pulled against the ropes. Miranda, I don't understand. What are you doing?
As I said before, Grandma and I have this special hobby where we collect rare and exquisite things. The best part is sometimes we even get paid. Do you know how much we are being offered for just one of your eyes?
There was an awkward silence.
Too afraid to guess? Then let me tell you. One of your eyes is worth $100,000.
Suddenly, a can rolled across the floor in front of Miranda, releasing thick gray smoke.
Hey, what are you doing?
I heard shuffling, then Miranda gasped. My ropes were cut, and as I stood, I rubbed my wrists. Miranda, I think you've met my mom already, I said as I nodded in her direction. As the gas disappeared, I walked over to Miranda and held her face tightly. Her arms were tied behind her back, and Mom was holding her arm. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dmitri Volkov, and I'm a bounty hunter. Do you know how much you and your grandmother are worth? There are people in very high places that you took some things from that want revenge. I waited a few seconds before replying. Too afraid to guess? Then let me tell you. Each of you is worth $250,000. That definitely trumps the $100,000 for one of my eyes, don't you think? So I guess you've guessed by now, huh? I'm not who I said I was. I'm a bounty hunter, and I only used Miranda to gain her trust. Well, she did the same thing to me, so I guess it's only what she deserved, right? I turned to my mom. Is the grandmother down and out? Mom smiled.
Like a newborn baby.
Okay, let's get this show on the road. There is money to be made. Mom escorted Miranda outside to the black panel van where Dad was already waiting. Mom threw her in the back of the van and, just like her grandmother, tied her arms to the metal rod above their heads. Once she was secured, Dad, Mom, and I hopped into the front of the van. There was a slight drizzle, which quickly turned into a heavy downpour. The traffic began to pile up, and Mom looked at her watch.
We've got to get to the airstrip in 1 hour or we'll miss our chance.
Don't worry.
Dad said, focused on the road.
We've never missed a deadline, and we aren't going to miss one now. We have a helpless old woman and a teenage girl. How much trouble could they be?
Suddenly, we felt the van rock slightly, followed by a loud bang. My parents and I shared a concerned look. Dad stopped the van, and Dad and I went to check it out.
Damn it!
Dad slammed his fist into the side of the van when he noticed that the door to the van was open and our bounty had escaped. Dad and I quickly searched the jam-packed streets. A short way ahead, I see Miranda and her grandmother's head bobbing between the cars. I was amazed at the swiftness and agility of the older woman. We need to stop them before they reach Lapano Falls, or we'll lose them for good. Lapano Falls was a camping ground not too far from the highway that was densely forested with a stream running through before it formed into a waterfall. Miranda and her grandmother separated once they got off the highway. Dad followed her grandmother and I followed Miranda. Miranda bolted towards the stream that was now raging from the rain. I cornered her between the stream and myself. "You've got nowhere to run, Miranda," I yelled over the rain. As I moved cautiously towards her, she stepped backwards. Her hands flailed in the air and her eyes widened with fright as she slipped backward into the torrential water, which swept her away. Without a second thought, I dove into the water to save Miranda. Luckily for the both of us, a tree had fallen close to the mouth of the waterfall. I was able to grab Miranda before holding onto the tree for dear life. Miranda was able to climb to safety and I followed closely. Once on the bank of the stream, we lay on our backs, gasping for air. Just as Miranda was about to get up and run, I snatched her hand. "You aren't getting away that easily." We got up slowly. For a minute, as we looked into each other's eyes, as we shared a moment, Miranda pulled me in for a deep kiss, and I obliged. The kiss lasted a few seconds before she pulled away.
I really do love you, Dimitri.
She caressed my face. Her face then contorted, and a devilish smile appeared on her face as she pushed me into the stream. I seized a handful of her clothing, and we both stumbled into the water. This time, however, we fell over the 15-foot waterfall and into the pool below. Coughing up water, we both dragged ourselves to shore, looking like two stray cats, soaked and waterlogged. Miranda looked at me weirdly as she asked in a raspy voice,
What's wrong with your eye?
I coughed and then chuckled. "Oh, that? I had special contacts made just so I could get on your radar and win your trust. After that, everything else was easy." Before I knew what was happening, Miranda slammed a large branch into my stomach that knocked the wind out of me. When she swung it at me again, I grabbed the stick and threw it into the water. My parents always told me to never hit girls, but this was an exception. I scrambled to my feet quickly and Miranda and I squared off. She threw the first punch and I returned rapid fire, hitting her squarely in the jaw. She stumbled backwards but was quickly able to regain her footing. "Don't make me hurt you," I yelled.
You can try.
Miranda replied as she hit me with a kick in the middle of my chest that sent me flying backwards. Our fight went on for a few minutes as punches and kicks flew through the air. I was finally able to get the upper hand and pin her down.
Dimitri!
Mom's voice came through to the clearing.
Are you okay?
"Yep, just another day on the job." Mom handed me a pair of handcuffs that I quickly placed on Miranda. Mom led me to the van that was just outside the forested area. Miranda's grandmother was already chained in the van, and we placed Miranda next to her. This time, Dad stayed in the back of the van while Mom took the wheel. By the time we got back on the road, the sun was peeking out from behind the clouds, and it had stopped raining. We arrived 15 minutes late to the drop-off.
You're late.
Raul, a big muscular guy, announced when we opened the van doors.
Oh, Raul.
Mom replied smoothly.
What's 15 minutes between friends? You know we always deliver.
Mom batted her eyes at him. A small smile crept to Raul's lips.
Ah, yes, the grandmother-granddaughter duo. My boss can't wait to get a hold of you.
Raul rubbed his hands together menacingly as Dad took Miranda and her grandmother out of the van.
I'll make you suffer if it's the last thing I do, Dimitri.
Miranda spat at my feet before she was dragged to the small airplane. Dad collected the money and counted it before we bade Raul farewell. As we headed home, I couldn't help but reminisce at the fun times and special moments that Miranda and I shared. A few years passed, and we had stopped the bounty hunting business after my parents retired and moved to Tobago to live. I got married to a beautiful woman named Onika, and we had a beautiful daughter, Rebecca. Every morning, I held my 7-year-old hand and walked her to the end of the street to wait for the school bus. As we saw the bus coming up the street, I gave her a hug, told her I loved her, and to have a great day at the school. The school bus stopped in front of us and the doors slid open. Rebecca waved at me.
Bye, Daddy.
As she got on, I looked up to smile at the bus driver, Rosie, and the blood drained from my face. In the seat where Rosie sat for the past 2 years, sat Miranda. I attempted to dive into the bus, but the doors closed and I bounced off them. As the bus pulled off, I noticed Rebecca by the window, and next to her was Miranda's grandmother. "Open the door! Open the door!" I screamed as I slammed the palm of my hand against the bus as I ran alongside it. The bus sped off, leaving me in the middle of the road. I placed my hands on my head and sank to my knees. No!